Hello everyone, it's Shannon here for Honeybee Stamps. In today's video, we're going to create this card featuring several products from the new modern spring release. Plus, I'll show you a really fun technique to make these super textured flowers. To create these flowers, you need some lightweight cardstock. This is 65-pound weight. And then we're going to crush it up, wrinkle it, smush it, get lots of folds and wrinkles on this panel of cardstock. I'm going to open it up and scrunch it up several times because I really want to get this paper crumpled. I'll even kind of open up and check some areas that aren't crumpled enough and then kind of just squeeze and really crumple those. I probably went overboard with this, but it has a really cool look. So there's our crumpled paper. I just kind of opened it up and pressed it gently flat. Now I'm going to grab some of these dies from the Lovely Layers Tulips die set, and I'm actually going to die cut this crumpled up paper with these dies. I'm going to get all the dies for the two flowers, the two largest flowers, as well as the two stems. So I grabbed all the dies here and I'm going to run them through my die cutting machine and with that crumpled paper. And then I'll carefully remove the dies and pull up the paper, and what we'll have left is these really textured die cuts. It's pretty cool. And this is going to allow us to get, when we ink blend over this, to get a lot of texture to pop. Okay, so I've got my stencil mat here and all the layers for my two flowers. So I'm going to start with the largest flower here and start with the largest layer, so the base layer, and quickly ink blend this with some picked raspberry distress ink. You can also use distress oxide if you have that as well. Just the ink dries faster, and since I'm really kind of touching this, it's just a little bit tidier. I am also going to ink blend a gradation over this layer, so kind of darker at the base and get lighter towards the tops of the petals. So once I finish that gradation, now I'm going to grab the ink pad and now start to run that ink pad directly over the top of the paper, and that will hit all of those raised areas of the folds and just add even more texture, or just I should say really highlight that texture. So now I'm just going to repeat that process for my remaining 3 layers. Each one of these flowers has 4 layers. So again, creating that ink blend and then going over the top with the ink pad directly to kind of pick up those raised areas in the paper and really highlight those with the ink. And then I'll finish with this last little petal here. Again, a little ink blend or a little gradation with an ink blend, and then touch it with the ink pad itself. Now we're going to move on to the second flower and just repeat the process. It's exactly the same, just finishing up that last petal for the smaller flower with the ink pad directly applied. Now we're going to move on to the stems. So the stems have 2 layers. And for this one, I'm going to do something a little bit different. I'm going to ink blend with 2 colors. So I'm going to start with Twisted Citron for kind of the top parts of the leaves and stems, and then I'll move on to Pine Needles for kind of the bottom half. And after I finish that ink blend, again, I'm going to amp up that texture with applying the ink pads directly to the die cuts. But this time I'm going to apply both ink pads, so starting with the Twisted Citron and then moving on to the Pine Needles, and that will really help to pick up again that texture, and it just has this super cool look. Now the large flower has these 2 center pieces as well, which I just die cut out of white cardstock, and I'm just going to, since they're so small, just going to quickly color them with my Copic markers. Starting with a yellow, then I'll move on to a green, color a little bit over the yellow so just I can kind of blend these two a little bit easier, they kind of match a little bit easier. Then I'll finish up the top of this stamen with a really light kind of yellow-green. And that's pretty much it, just darkening up a little bit with my green. And now we're going to glue the 2 together, add a little bit of glue to the center, and pop that stamen right on top. Now that I finished this flower part, we are actually ready to put it together. So I'm going to start by gluing my layers together. I'm just adding a little bit of glue to the bottom of the flower. I don't want to glue all the layers because I want to be able to, I don't want to glue, I should say, the layer completely to one another. I want to be able to kind of pop it up. So I'm only gluing at the very bottom a little bit of glue just to stick them together, and that way I can kind of pop up the layers a little bit more with my fingers so they're not actually glued down hard to each other. Now for this last layer, this little petal, I am going to use a little foam adhesive to again get this to pop up even more, get even more dimension, and just stick that down, and we have our beautiful super textured flower. Now we're going to move on to our second flower, our smaller one. Again, just adding a little bit of glue to the very bottom of the flower because I don't want to completely glue these layers shut. And then for these last two petals, I'm going to use some foam adhesive again, just to get them to pop even more. So I'll just put that last little bit of foam adhesive on that petal, and our second flower is done. Now the stems and leaves are really easy. I'm just going to add adhesive to the leaves and stick them right down onto the stem. And I'll do the exact same thing here for our smaller one, and that will complete our flowers and stems. Now we're going to move into our sentiment. So I'm going to use the new kind Buzzwords, use those two dies from that die set, and die cut the smaller one out of white cardstock twice, and this medium one or larger one out of vellum. Now I'm going to layer them up, starting with one of my white cardstock ones, add some glue to the top of it. Then I'll take the vellum kind and place it right on top. Next, I will add some adhesive to the back side of my second white kind and place that on top. And what this does is just add a little bit more structure to this, a little bit more strength to it, and also helps to get that that vellum a little bit more away from your back panel, and that helps to make it pop a little bit more from the background. Now we're moving on to our sentiment strip or our sub-sentiment. I have the kind Buzzwords stamp set here. I'm going to stamp a sentiment from that set onto some black cardstock, dip it into some white embossing powder, and then heat set this. Then I'll trim that down to a sentiment strip. And now we're ready to bring it all together. I did decide to add a layer of black cardstock or die cut that kind out of black cardstock and glue it on top of my stacked white one. I just kind of thought I needed a little bit more contrast from the white, so I went with black. I'm going to start with this card by adhering my stems and flowers to my card base. So this is just an A2 top folding white card base, and I'm going to glue these with liquid adhesive directly down. And once I stick my flowers and stems down, I'm ready to move on to my sentiment. I'm going to start with the word cut kind, and I'm actually going to double up my foam adhesive here to make sure I can it can fit over the leaf, because the leaf has some foam adhesive on it as well, so I need to double up here on my kind. Once I doubled up on my kind, I'll then remove the backing on the adhesive and stick it right over those stems. And then we'll finish up with our little sub-sentiment. I'm just going to double up the adhesive here so it kind of matches the word die cut, and then stick that down, and that will actually complete my card. I'll hold it to the camera here so you can hopefully really get a good look at those textured tulips. I love how these flowers turned out. I just love the depth and interest that crumpled up texture adds. It just is so cool. And the little bit of ink blending and kind of hitting it with the ink pad really does highlight this. And I can't wait to try this with some other dies. I think this is a really fun and innovative technique. I hope you guys enjoyed today's card and video. If any questions about the products I used, please check out the links below in the description. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful day.